This conference will now be recorded.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Honorable Secretary General Dr. G.P. Agarwal and Dr. Sanjeev Lag, Executive Secretary WASME, I, Megha Chadha, Deputy Director WASME, heartily welcome all dignitaries and participants for live webinar. Prabir Roy in conversation with Professor N. Vinod Chandra Menon on strategies for promoting MSME recovery efforts. Let me brief about WASME, a global organization having member representatives in more than 100 countries, spearheading cause and development and promotion of SMEs worldwide through policy advocacy, information dissemination, conferences, seminars, events, trainings, publication, network linkages, and many more since 1980. WASME enjoys the consultative and observer status of the United Nations. Now, I invite Dr. Sanjeev Lag, Executive Secretary WASME, to welcome guests and deliver inaugural address. Let me introduce Dr. Sanjeev Lag. Dr. Sanjeev Lag, currently working as Executive Secretary at WASME, looking after global operations after around 25 years of rich experience in strategy research, consultancy, projects, contributed 18 research papers and actively associated with 15 ministries of Government of India, Harvard Business Review, and ResearchGate, serving as board committee member of Symbiosis University, Noida, India, NDIM New Delhi, Mentorex and IEF recognized by UNESCO Paris, France, Ministry of MSME Government of India, SP Jain Global Management School, Dubai, UAE, Tata Consultancy Services, Delhi University, Times Group, Economics Times, Bennett University, Greater Noida, India, Mentorex, Teflas, Mumbai, Aaj India Today, NDPC, India. Author of a book titled MSME, Crash or Opportunity in COVID-19, published by Lab Publishing Europe. Handing over mic to Dr. Sanjeev Lag, Executive Secretary WASME. Dr. Lag, please, thank you so much.
Thank you, Megha, for wonderful introduction. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is my honor to just welcome you on behalf of our Secretary General, Dr. G.P. Agarwal. I heartily welcome Professor N. Vinod Chandra Menon and Mr. Prabir Roy, Senior Advisor WASME, for contributing their valuable and precious time to make available for this webinar. My special thanks to Mr. Prabir Roy, Senior Advisor WASME, for introducing Professor Menon. I also welcome all the dignitaries who have taken up their valuable time to participate in this webinar. As you are very much aware of that, this pandemic has disrupted businesses, including MSMEs, and there is no clue when and how it stops. We are just expecting the third wave to come, and some experts are talking about COVID pandemic will be the new normal. And you are very much aware of that. MSMEs are the backbone of our economy as well as the many countries' economy. In India, 63.4 million MSMEs are there. They together contribute to 30% to the GDP, 50% to the exports, and employ 111 million persons. And government's target for 2024 is for MSMEs to account for 50% GDP, 75% to exports, and employing 150 million people. So lots of good opportunities are there, and government of India has already met the target of 5 trillion economy, 5 trillion economy. And this coronavirus, COVID, has severely impacted the lives of informal micro enterprises constituting 99% of the MSMEs, owing to a lack of managerial resources, capabilities, backward forward linkages to cope with economic downturn. The government launched a vision to achieve economic growth, creating jobs, reducing poverty in India through MSME development requires critical interventions in the MSME policy and institutional frameworks. While the government's self-reliant India Mission Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan announced in May 2020 is conceived to provide liquidity and institutional support for MSME survival in the midst of this COVID-19. An extra effort is needed to channel limited public resources in a more effective manner to improve MSME business practices, facilitate transformation of their business models, encourage MSMEs to seize market opportunities under the post-COVID-19. It is the new normal, and this current COVID outbreak has already left a lasting impact on the economy. Global supply chains are already down, imports and exports are stalled, unemployment is surging in across the world and India. MSMEs have been already impacted the most. Thousands of stranded and jobless migrant workers across the country are proof of how MSMEs have been the worst casualty of this COVID. I'm not going into details because we have the esteemed panelists to discuss on the topic what will be the strategies for this promoting MSME recovery efforts. So let me just introduce the esteemed panelists here, Professor N. Vinod Chandra Menon. Professor N. Vinod Chandra Menon has over 35 years of working experience, of which more than 25 years have been spent in the field of disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and public policy analysis. He has worked in UNICEF India, country office in New Delhi, in charge of emergency preparedness and response, and is a founder member of the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, Government of India, with the status of a Union Minister of States in the Government of India. Professor Menon has been invited to address several international conferences organized by UN agencies, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, etc. He is a senior advisor to several institutions and organizations and is on the governing and advisory boards of several institutions. We are very fortunate to have such a great personality over here to discuss on the topic. And we have the second panelist, Praveen Roy. Praveen is a serial entrepreneur and is senior advisor to Wasme and co-founder Payment of B2B fintech payments company, and has worked in government, public and MNC as VP, CTO, CEO, and red herring Asia Top 100 awardees for promising tech startup companies. In addition, Ravi sits on the boards of several private, public and industry organizations like WASME. I'm just handing over this mic to Mr. Praveen Roy, inviting him to just initiate the discussion. Mr. Roy, please. Thank you. Your voice is not coming, sir. Unmute your mic, sir. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Megha. Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev Laik. Thank you, Dr. Sushil Agarwal. It's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Menon here today with us. Professor Menon, as Sanjeev said, is an institution builder. He himself is a product of a very eminent institution in India, the IIM Ahmedabad. And as everybody knows, IIM Ahmedabad had some very eminent institution builders as their forerunners and pioneers, whether it was the Sarabhais and the Samuel Pauls and Dr. Patel of the world. And with this experience and his experience in National Disaster Management Agency, I thought he is a good fit to address the MSME entrepreneurs today in the midst of the COVID and the pandemic. So, Professor, cutting to the chase, NDMA, we all know, is for disaster recovery, and you mentioned emergency response. So, I don't want to label or tag something as disaster, but certainly what we need today is emergency response. And to the average Joe, they may not know what NDMA does or what it can do. What should be its wish list for the MSME sectors? How can it play a role in preparing or execution of emergency response for the struggling MSME sector that Sanjeev has so articulately described just a few minutes back?
Yes. Thank you very much, Ravir, and I'm very grateful to you and Vasme, Dr. Sanjeev Laik, and Dr. Gyan Prakash Agarwal and the team to basically give me an opportunity to share some thoughts. Because, as you very rightly said, this opportunity before us is to really see how the government agencies and institutions and the ministries of both the government of India and the state governments can support MSMEs, to basically bounce back. Because the topic actually talks about recovery, but recovery is actually initially, for about a few years, the UN and multilateral organizations used to consider recovery as a restoration of normalcy. But in most situations, normalcy itself is, suboptimal, because you really have a lot of constraints. You really do not have the kind of opportunities for merit, opportunities for expansion, opportunities for understanding the market, and also the backward and forward linkages. So I think, as you very rightly said, the opportunity for the institutions like the National Disaster Management Authority of the Government of India and the NDMA of various countries is to really stand supportive to MSME sector. And this is not by notional stimulus packages, but by really bringing together stimulus which can actually provide support to organizations, MSME enterprises, both entrepreneurs as well as their employees. And there is a lot of potential there, and that is where WASME and institutions and organizations can actually provide a role for leadership, thought leadership in advocacy.
So, so that's a good one-point agenda that NDMA and WASME can put across a one-point agenda on communicating the plight of the MSME sector in India. But you've been chairman of NDMA, and we all know NDMA as the first responder in natural disasters and climate, as you mentioned, and now in emergency response due to, say, a health epidemic or a pandemic that we are facing. With you as, say, chairman NDMA, what are some 2 or 3 bullet points that you would put in place on day one, which relates to how we can get MSMEs back on the path to recovery?
Yeah, Prabir, actually, the chairman of the National Disaster Management Authority is the Prime Minister, and the National Disaster Management Authority has a vice chairman who is delegated the powers from the Prime Minister and a group of members. So I'm one of the founder members of the National Disaster Management Authority, And the question which you had for me is to really see what are the priority agenda which we will be able to really get the agencies like the National Disaster Management Authorities in India and other countries to support the MSME sector. I think the first most important issue is to really understand the enormity of the problem, the scale of the problem, because Dr. Sanjeev like mentioned the numbers in terms of the number of enterprises, the percentage of contribution to the GDP, percentage contribution to exports, and so on. So this recognition that MSME sector is actually a formidable ally for the economic development, for the transformational of the economy to a $5 trillion economy, is actually something which has to be recognized by all the policymakers, and that is the first thing. And so for which we need formidable data. So there is a need for a data-led, technology-driven understanding of the sector by all the policymakers. So when I mention technology-driven, what I have in mind is basically the MSME sector covers a variety of sectors. Okay, and they look at various industrial units, also technology units, which can actually provide a lot of frontier pioneering technology innovations through their enormous potential which they already have. The talent which they have in terms of human resources is really formidable. I have seen some of the enterprises which are doing leading edge research and development and coming out with products. We have seen that during the COVID-19. We have seen that the enterprises which really supported are the people who were able to put together solutions sitting at home or sitting in their industrial bases without actually getting exposed to risk of infection. They were able to come up with solutions. You've seen non-contact thermal scanners being produced within the country. You have seen PPE kits which are being produced in the country. We have seen ventilators coming out from within the country. So these are all possibilities. And so we need a disaster to show you the opportunity. And in China, in the Mandarin language, the word disaster is written with two characters. The first one standing for danger and the second one standing for opportunity. So a disaster is an opportunity for really, doing a lot of course corrections. And for the government of India and for the various governments which, the distinguished delegates are actually representing here in WASME, we need to really have that kind of a recognition that the opportunity which a disaster really presents, whether it is a geological disaster like earthquakes or tsunami, or a hydrometeorological disaster like cyclones, hurricanes, or typhoons, which devastate countries like Philippines, or even the countries in the Pacific like Fiji and Vanuatu. We need to actually use technology and come up with sensors, come up with early warning solutions, come up with technology-driven solutions. I think MSME sector can actually come up with a bouquet of opportunities and options to aid this industrial sector. So we've seen that during the floods in Bangkok in 2010, it paralyzed automobile sector and the information technologies hardware sector, because most of these were actually coming in from Bangkok, from the MSME sector, the ancillaries, the products which are actually there. So I think the product mix is important. Looking for opportunities is important. So institutions like NDMA and also the Ministry of Company Affairs and the ministries in charge of small and medium enterprises need to come up with these kind of enabling solutions.
Yeah, that's you mentioned that every disaster is also an opportunity. I like that tone that you've taken, and this is a good time, as you mentioned, and as Dr. Sanjeev and other eminent speakers have said, this is a good time for us to course correct or to reset our path going forward. Now, let us move away a bit from NDMA and look at a little macro situation, and you have hinted at that earlier. Supposing we look at it as not only from the government side, but even corporate sector side, private sector side, citizen side, a lot of work in the pandemic, as you rightfully said, the immediate emergency response, to my mind, was not from the government. The immediate emergency response in India post-COVID was from the MSME and the private citizen side, whether it was data management, technology, community health facilitation of people who are sick, who need beds, oxygen, ventilators, medicines, care. All this was mobilized predominantly in the social sector and the citizen sector, and then followed up by support from government and private corporate sector. So, as you rightly said, I mean, obviously the MSME sector does not have to be only business and industry, but also has a role to play along with people sitting at home and making masks or ensuring the supply chain is not broken and your PPE supplies there, your RPE supplies there, your ventilators maintenance is going on, and huge amount of emergency response in the health side. We all know, and you know it because you've been doing it, has come from ordinary citizens like you and me and Sanjeev, because we all have been involved in helping someone to find a bed, find a medicine, ship oxygen from Dubai to India, tankers of oxygen, O2. So you have played a role in that. So at the same time, how, what other steps do you feel that at a macro level, not just NDMA level, that we can look at to get MSME back on the road to prosperity?
Right. If you really look at four frameworks which are currently helping the transition in development, transformation in development processes all over the world, these four major frameworks are the following. The first is the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. The second is the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which was actually concluded at Sendai in Japan. And the third is the Habitats, UN Habitats, the New Urban Agenda. And the fourth is the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which have got 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So these four major frameworks offer enormous opportunities to the MSME sector. If you really look at these 17 Sustainable Goals itself, each one of them actually has solutions which are coming out from the MSME sector. But we need to really take it forward in terms of understanding the potential and then trying to come up with solutions which can actually address these 17 goals. Similarly, we also have the new announcements by the UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, saying that 2021 to 2031 is the decade for ecosystem restoration. And what is ecosystem restoration, which can be done with the help of technology, is actually coming out again from MSMEs. We can actually use the MSMEs to also contribute to solutions for the ESG. ESG is Environmental and Social Governance Fund. So ESG is going to become something mandatory for all corporates to basically comply with. And so for the ESG, MSME sector has a huge potential to contribute, whether it is in terms of sensors for water quality monitoring or air quality monitoring, or pollution control, or looking at any other solutions. Say for instance, you have these deformations which happen because of disasters. Okay, that is infrastructure gets deformed, whether it is a dam or a power hydropower structure, or a telecom structure, or even a national highway, or even a metro rail project, telecommunication project. All these can get deformed by an earthquake or a tsunami. So there are solutions available which are like the solutions using SAR, which is the synthetic aperture radars. And these synthetic aperture radars can now also be used to really look at deformations before, after, during, and after a disaster. So there are many solutions, technology-enabled solutions possible, and MSME has been contributing a lot. And I think the new frontier areas could also be explored.
Right. I like what you're saying, that going forward, that you are looking to MSMEs for two things: not only quick supply of materials which are required as a part of emergency response, but also you see a longer role for them in technology solutions and data, use of technology and data to put things back again quickly, has also ensured that the effects of either natural disaster or a man-made disaster or unknown event like a pandemic, the response is faster and we mitigate some of the risks. So, as a professor and consultant at large, and a person sitting on the outside, what do you think really ails MSME sector today? Number one. Number two, what steps have been taken which have been useful for MSME in the last 1.5 years? And number three, what more steps are required to put MSME back on the platform of sustained and high growth?
Yes. So what ails the sector? And I think if you really look at the MSME sector in the country, and also in many other countries, whether it is in Central America or in Africa or in Asia Pacific, you actually can see that most of the enterprises which are working in the MSME sector needs to have an enabling partnership with the government agencies. In most countries, actually, the MSME sector is facing the regulatory control by government agencies and institutions. I think that regulatory control has to change to, an enabling and participatory kind of public-private partnership to really take this to its logical conclusion. Dr. Sanjeev like mentioned that you have the potential of expanding this to 150 million people to be employed by the sector. I think when you really look at a 1.4 billion population, we need to see that employment generation is going to be a challenge to basically make sure that we have good revenue models which can actually provide cost benefit solutions to address the problems which are faced by the economy and the society. And these problems which are faced by the society and economy can be mapped. A lot of people are already doing that kind of work, and you are one of the persons who's actually done that kind of initiative in identifying problems and coming up with solutions, which can actually address those, problems. So I think, the major support which is needed is in terms of being MSME friendly policies, and MSME friendly policies can actually help trigger employment generation, income generation, and also problem solving for the problems which the society and the economy are facing. And coming to the second question which you had asked, what has been done in the last 1.5 years during the COVID period? I think this is a very challenging question because what we have been seeing on the media, on the mainstream media is something different. What you're seeing on the social media is something different. What you're seeing on the alternative media is something very different. So the reality is actually something in between these three, between the mainstream media, the social media, and the alternative media. So I think beyond all these three, you also have the perceptions of the people in the sector, MSME sector. So if you ask people whether you have actually benefited from the schemes of the government and the stimulus packages of the government, I'm sure that you would be hearing the feedback from the people that these are all notional. These have not really made a difference in terms of the book of accounts of the companies. And I have been seeing this kind of messages coming in from many places where people are saying that they are getting the demand requests from the banks, and there is no moratorium for the kind of loans which have been taken by the MSME sector, and many people have actually really suffered. In fact, if you really look at many people who had actually invested, hoping that there will be a kind of business boom, that business boom has only come in certain selected areas. So I think we need to really be very realistic about the kind of support which has actually gone to the MSME sector from the government, and we need to do a reality check with the local organizations. And I'm sure WASME will be able to do that kind of analysis from the countries in the region, in Asia Pacific, and also from Central America and Africa, in terms of how various governments have actually helped the MSME sector. So these good practices need to be documented. And I think that would be a huge opportunity for understanding and cross-country comparisons, trans-border comparisons in terms of what is actually being done. Just to give you an illustration, Bhutan actually has only one death due to COVID. Okay, that is because they were able to contain this, and the total number of cases is only about 2,200. And when you really see even the northeast states which are close to Bhutan, you'll see that right now they're going through a 21.5%, 14.5%, and 13.8% kind of positivity rate. So how is it that Bhutan was able to contain that? We need to understand the kind of processes, socio-cultural, and the kind of national will in terms of making sure that people follow a certain discipline and advisories. Now, coming to the third question, I think we have to basically see what needs to be done on priority, and I think that is where it will be good to really have this kind of a consultative feedback mechanism, a two-way process with the people from the sector. If you really look at what happened during the Chennai floods in 2010 and 2015, we can actually see that the MSME sector got hit very badly, and especially those who are not insured. So I think the enabling mechanisms could also be support from the insurance sector, support from the the ministries, support from science and technology ministries, and support from the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Biotechnology, and various other key agencies of the government, which can look at products and services from the MSME sector.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that there are various strains of thought of what ails MSME sector, some in the main media, some in the social media, some, as you rightfully said, in the alternate media. But the main feedback loop is the reality from the field level. The field level reality or the ground level reality is somewhere I feel that we have not been able to put a temperature on that. So many of the measures that have happened till now have not percolated down to the levels at the micro level, at the nano level, and affected a large part of the 60 million. You might find only the tip of the 60 million who may have benefited, the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 million people. The large part of the long tail of 60 million, many of these measures may not be accessible to them, or they have not been able to reach out to them. And you mentioned about Tamil Nadu, but even in Philippines and Indonesia, which is predominantly the GDP is made of MSME, and employment is 97 to 99% in MSME. Indonesia, MSME sector employs 99% of all workforce. India is obviously quite a large percent. I'm told that last wave 2, 10 million people lost jobs. Wave 1, as per CIME, 100 million migrants were left incomeless or had to go back to the villages, and probably led to reduced income or no income. So all these people have to come back together and make MSME the engine of growth. Because if you don't have income, you don't have job, you don't have consumption, therefore you don't have demand. So it's a supply chain of facilitation which is going to get MSME back, and your measures have to help in ensuring that more MSMEs can benefit as versus only a few. So my question then to you is, in MSME, manufacturing has taken a big hit. and services are still suffering because there's no uptake for their products. So, who do you think, which are the sectors you feel in MSME have been hit the most? And which are the sectors for the MSME entrepreneurs here? Which are the sectors do you see have done well or turned themselves around or on the path of good growth? Can you just give us some examples of badly hit sectors and some people who've come out of it well and some who have pivoted and reinvented themselves?
Yes, actually, when you really look at the problem which you mentioned about loss of jobs, for the people in the unorganized sector and in the organized sector, we see a difference. The unorganized sector people, actually, we have seen the informal sector or the unorganized sector, the percentage of people who were there in India in the 2001 census was 31%. 31.5 crore people were informal sector, unorganized sector, migrant workers, interstate migrant workers, 31.5 crore, which is 31% of the population. But in 2011 census, it became 45.6 crores. That is 38% of the population were in the informal, unorganized sector. So if you really look at the MSME sector also, these people who have actually gone back from the cities to the states, to the districts, and to the villages is actually an untapped potential. So the enterprises in those districts and in those states, whether it is Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or Assam or Tripura or Meghalaya or Manipur or Maharashtra, we need to really see that there is a need for looking at employment opportunities and income generation opportunities for these people. When you have a product idea, you already have the cheap labor. In fact, everybody says that Indian labor is very cheap, and you are able to do a lot more with the Indian labor, whether it is in the blue collar, white collar industry also. You see that there is a need for looking at these untapped potentials. So migrant workers who have gone back, are actually there to really help in strengthening that. As mentioned by you, manufacturing, and even in the manufacturing sector, there are many products and services which are actually being provided by the MSME sector. The ancillary services, which are there for the mainstream large industries, the large scale industries, and also even the public sector and undertakings of the center as well as the states. Many products and services used to be provided by the MSMEs. But in the last 1.5 years during the COVID time, we have seen that there has been a problem, a bottleneck, as Dr. Sanjeev Laik also mentioned. We have a problem in terms of the trade barriers. We cannot actually work. We cannot work in industrial estates. We cannot actually bring people to work in large IT companies. We have seen that many of them are working from home. So the companies which have really benefited, I think, are those companies which actually have knowledge management products and services. So the data and information technology led industrial enterprises have actually had a benefit. In fact, I was also reading that many IT employees are actually now negotiating with their companies for the pay enhancements, because they're getting very good offers from competing firms, with better terms of engagement. And that is because there's a huge opportunity which IT companies are getting because of the COVID closures, and we are seeing that with many of the IT companies, which are recruiting large numbers. In fact, some of the large companies are actually going on a huge, employment, drive. So I think, we need to really do that kind of a mapping. Which are the sectors which have actually got benefited, and which are the sectors which have actually got left behind? And WASME can actually help in supporting those enterprises and sectors which have actually got left out in this whole process.
Yes, I think it's true that I'm glad you are saying, and I've heard it in this forum from other panelists and eminent speakers, that this time, whenever we talk about MSME 2.0 or MSME 4.0 post pandemic or from now onwards, I always keep hearing technology and data a lot. So that is a good thing because earlier MSMEs were not so familiar with technology, digital and digitalization and data. Now I'm finding that these words have caught on in the consciousness of MSME policymakers and also entrepreneurs, and they are also mentioning it as part of their portfolio of services when they're going forward. I think some of the sectors we all know which are doing well and have done well is obviously pharma, chemicals, plastics, automotive ancillaries, steel, cement. Some of these have showed a good bounce back, both in COVID 1 and now in COVID 2. And they're showing good numbers, because of which the recent industrial index production has gone up 23%, even in the first quarter of a financial year. So that's a good sign. But obviously, there are sectors which are still struggling. I suspect they are from the services sector. And for them, as also for the manufacturing guys, they need to adapt and adjust themselves to introduction of more technology in their businesses, in their business model, in their business plans. And Sanjeev normally talks about the various initiatives of marketplace, electronic marketplace for small scale industries, where they come and sell their products in a Amazon type marketplace, and also a place where they can get credit, so that they get credit and they're also able to uh, uh, use the marketplace to reach out across the world for their services or even products. So uh, as the pandemic, hopefully we don't have further major surges or spikes. We may have isolated bursts or breakouts. We don't know as yet, though perhaps you know only too well that there's a lot of prediction that by third quarter there could be some kind of resurgence. But if we skip that, possibly we are good to go. So from now onward, that is July onwards, for the next quarter, next 2 quarters, uh, what what are some of the steps an MSME entrepreneur should look at in the next 6 months, uh, for him to just focus on, assuming that there could be something out there which again can bring supply chain bottlenecks and disruption, or that may not be severe, or it may not be there at all. What can you say to help him, the entrepreneur decision maker, to help him in his decision making?
Yeah, in fact, actually, most of the people who are leading MSME enterprises uh, already have been going through that kind of problem definition and a problem identification to really look for solutions. What can be done, which is actually really transformational, and also which is a huge quantum leap from the way in which firms have been performing so far, because of the shocks which they've been facing. Now, I think one of the most important fields where we can actually really do that kind of huge quantum shift is the startup ecosystem. We have a startup ecosystem which is there in the country, and also in many of the countries, we are seeing the startup ecosystem coming up because of a lot of talent from the engineering institutions and also from management schools coming up with identifying products and services. So if the MSME sector can provide that thought leadership in incubating some of the startup enterprises, I think there is a huge win-win situation there. Because you have the potential of the financial institutions providing funding to support such initiatives if you have a good idea, which is a bankable idea, and you have a credit worthy entrepreneur who can actually come up and then provide these solutions. I think there is a huge opportunity for looking at leading edge products and services which can actually be hugely transformational.
Yeah, Actually, I was going to ask you that question just now, but you've already answered that. But just on a similar track, you personally have been at the forefront of emergency COVID help and facilitation in the last 3-4 months, whether it is beds, oxygen, medicines, hospital capacity, helping people get funds for their treatment, helping in public communication on need for better planning and coordination, which you interact with state governments and local bodies. You've also been an advocate for better policy design, and you have formed a policy analysis group to address that. So tell us, Professor, how can we in the MSME sector, and I'm sure there are many of us here, how can we help you and also volunteer civil society organizations help in creating better emergency and public health response?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In fact, I would like to relate to what you mentioned about what Dr. Sanjeev Nayak mentioned about the marketplace of ideas. Right now there is a need for some kind of using the online potential for creating more information and outreach for the kind of products and services in the MSME sector. I've seen artisans and craftspeople looking for opportunities because they need to find buyers for their products, and they have been finding it extremely difficult with all the lockdowns and various other setbacks. But however, if you create some kind of a boutique of products and services which are needed by the society, both in terms of aesthetics as well as in terms of usability, I think we might actually find that it will have huge potential for successful entrepreneurial activities. So I think that we need to identify the startup ideas, solutions,
Right.
and also identify constituencies which can actually be supported, because MSMEs actually can benefit a lot from these kind of constituencies, whether it is the artisans who are actually dealing with their IPR. If you can use IPR for artisans, the kind of skill sets which they have. Is it possible for the MSME sector to also look at being a platform for
Right.
cross-country sharing of products and services? Whether it is the kind of expertise which is there among the tribals using bamboo, or the weavers using very sophisticated skill sets which can actually put even a sari through a ring. That's the kind of the elegance and the quality of craftsmanship which we have among the artisans. So I think that there is a need for supporting these kind of sectors, and MSME can actually also be doing that social service through that social exchanges which we have. It's not just a stock exchange which is looking at
Right.
a new opportunity coming up through the social stock exchange.
I think this is a brilliant idea. In fact, in all the discussions that we have been having, the people in the artisans and the creative people and the handicrafts people, the single person enterprise model, mom and pop or family run, small scale, nano scale, self-employed. I think they are the most affected, and no scheme is available to them. Now, recently, I'm told Delhi government is planning to give artisans and local handicraft and local creative businesses a handout, whether they're drama, theater, handbag making, chappal making. So they are having a scheme to ensure that they have some funds at their disposal so that they can restart their businesses, weaving baskets, etc. And there's another company that I know of which has started a marketplace in creative products and services. It's based in Himachal Pradesh. It tries to mobilize all the local generational creative uh, capacities that that state has built up over over centuries, and made them come together on a platform where they can sell their wares across India and across the world, just from small isolated village and hamlets in Himachal Pradesh. It's called directcreate.com. And these two are also young entrepreneurial people, but in the retail, creative handicrafts space, which I think is hopefully will scale out like a marketplace in time to come. So I'm coming quite close to the end of my questions, and possibly you might have some question for me later on. But probably my last question to you would be, in your mind, what defines what would define success for an MSME? What is your mantra for MSME success?
Yeah, I think the successful entrepreneur would be somebody who would actually nurture several such enterprises from among their employees and all the people who come into contact with their lives. So which means basically we need to have a mushrooming of MSME enterprises across the country, and also incubate ideas among people in many other countries, because WASME is a platform which actually has people from 112 countries. So if we can actually get to know some of the good practices and some of the good products and ideas from Africa or Central America or Asia Pacific, South Asia and Southeast Asia, and I find that actually a lot more creative problem solving can actually happen, and we can have a better humanity which is actually conscious of the kind of ecological problems which our future generations will probably be able to escape from, with the kind of innovative solutions which you and your team and colleagues can actually provide. Because a business idea which can actually be not only profit making but also socially relevant, can we actually have more and more of public goods from the MSME sector which can actually contribute to that? And I think that will be something which will be a success mantra for an entrepreneur. Can we actually have many more clones of Prabir Roy, who can actually come up with many more red herring kind of solutions? Can you be the gardener who can actually nurture many seeds and saplings, and then make it into something which can actually spread across the world, which is eco-friendly, which is problem solving, which is actually a quantum leap for humanity's problem solving. I think that will be an entrepreneur's dream.
Wow, that's really inspirational, Professor. And I think many MSME entrepreneurs today, actually, they may not want gyan so much as they want some seeds of inspiration and hope and motivation. And I think you have been very helpful in providing that for many of us. We are all also entrepreneurs, but we also share this platform with others. So my last question is that supposing you and I and Sanjeev, we all landed up in Delhi, and we went to meet the government, and then what is the one thing you would want to tell the decision makers about MSMEs? One message that you would leave behind with the decision makers?
I think that message was actually given by you, to really treat MSME as the engine of growth for the 21st century India to be the world leader. And not only for India to be the world leader, but for all the countries in Central America, Africa, and Asia Pacific to come up with income generation and employment generation opportunities for the people. And that, I think, would be something which can actually provide quality of life, better quality of life for the people, who are employees of the MSME sector.
Right. So, do you have any question to me? I know we've had a good. I hope I have not taken up too much of time, but asking questions. But would you like to ask me a question? It should not be a one-way flow of questions and answers. I'd be happy to take any question that you have in mind. Before I hand over to Jim.
Yeah, Prabir, actually, I think I would like to ask you, what will be your mantra for this kind of a transformational role for the MSMEs to bounce back? Because we used to say build back better after a disaster, but build back better would mean basically build institutions, build enterprises, build transformational things like a huge banyan tree, which can actually provide that kind of solutions to people. Can we really think of the MSME sector coming up with iconic enterprises which can actually be inspirational for the others? So what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, that's a good question for which I might be found wanting in my answer, but I will give it a shot. I would say that build best for tomorrow, because MSMEs have got step motherly and treatment till now. So unless MSMEs themselves feel that they are the best in what they do, they will constantly be buffeted by the winds of change and by the cycles in the economy. So the culture that build best for tomorrow will ensure that they are resilient and they will sustain if they adopt and follow best practices and good solutions which kind of manage ups and downs of life. I think that itself requires a mind shift, a mindset change, because MSME people don't think big. I think very few people do. They start as MSME, and when they die, the next generation also continues, but and then they don't scale up. So the scaling up from being a micro to, as Sanjeev was saying, a mini or midi or large enterprise, which we have been lucky to be able to do, requires a certain mindset, a vision of scale and believability in what you have done. That is actually between the years. Belief comes from here, not from your capability and ability and education so much. But if you think big and you act big and you build best, I can rest assured that the same MSME, as we were discussing in the early in the morning, the same MSE will be responsible for more number of IPOs in the years to come. It won't be Tata, Birla, etc. IPOs. It will be unknown companies who only 4 or 5 years back started or started during pandemic, and they have become big because they thought big and they raised money from the public market and they have become household names. So the future is let MSME brands names become a household word, and that will happen when they are able to raise capital in public markets and probably also, as you said, adopt some of the best practices and don't think of themselves as just small businesses to help big businesses. Yes, they will do that, but they can become big by themselves and give a good run for the money for the large companies, and they will do as well, because a lot of talent in MSMEs I've seen, because they don't have 9 to 5 jobs, they don't have steady paycheck, right? They may have taken credit and debt and loan and sold jewelry. So for them, there's not only a passion, but there's no cause for failure. There is no failure is not an option for them. So they have to make it work. That resilience and determination is what will make them really stand in there and come out of this. And I think out of pandemic, MSME will come out pretty well, though I know a lot will suffer, no doubt. 30-40% will suffer. The balance 60% will reinvent themselves, and in the time to come, that same 60% will be able to drive and be the engine of growth and give contribute more to the GDP, to exports, and to employment. Obviously, employment generation is very key for MSMEs, and they will be able to do that at scale, not 2-3 people, but 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, not 1 person, 2 person, 3 person. So some of these goal posts I would put out there. Thank you for your question. I hope I could do some justice to that. And Sanjeev, I would like to hand over to you for any questions from the audience and the public.
Yeah,
Thank
Praveen,
you.
before Dr. Laik
Yes,
takes
yes,
over,
yes.
can I just mention one thing, which is actually, a poem called My Soul Has a Hat. This poem was written by Mario del Andrade, and this poem says, My soul has a hat. It concludes by 2 lines, which says, uh, we have 2 lives, and the second begins when you realize you only have one. So
Wow.
there is a book. There's a book also called Second Chapter.
Very,
I think we are all in our second chapters. in many ways.
Yes.
And
Yes.
COVID-19 has really brought this forward, so if we can actually believe that we have two lives, and the second begins when we realize that we only have one, is actually something which is a very, very profound message. And when I see the MSME sector, I feel that actually many of you who are there in thought leadership are all providing your own contributions in terms of what you can do to improve the quality of life of the people around us. And we've seen that during the migrant workers, when they were moving forward, traveling back to the villages hundreds of miles, how people actually supported them from different parts of the country. And there is also another powerful poem called Success by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And this one actually, is also very powerful, because it says that, success is when you actually leave the world better by a healthy child, or a garden patch, or by a redeemed social condition, to know that even one life has breathed easier because you lived.
Very
And
good.
if we can all take
Very
that
well
kind of
said.
a message, that through our lives, if we can actually provide support to the people who are actually troubled, who are going through distress, I think that will be a huge contribution. I really enjoyed the conversation and the discussion and the questions from you, Prabir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Dr. Sanjeev, thank you.
Yes.
Over to you.
So it was it's a wonderful discussion over there. We have already noted all the points mentioned by Professor Menon over here. What are the points for regarding research and development, and all survey, and all the types of reports, and what about the policy advocacy and all. We have already started all various types of initiatives by WASME. We have recently partnered with Amazon and Tata, that is the next arm for digitization process. As you are very much aware of that, digitization and this COVID pandemic will be the new normal. So you have to adopt and adapt the technology for your growth. And we have also taken some of the initiatives like a startup, MSME, and the government. So the bridge among all these partners, stakeholders, so that they can better understand about the processes and all. As far as Praveen has rightly said about the mindset of the MSMEs over there. So they have been already changing their mindset as this pandemic, first wave as well as the second wave, they have already taught them a lesson. And there is a saying in Hindi that "Marta kya nahi karta." So a micro, small. So means if they want to just have the sustain as well as revive in this pandemic, they have to adopt as well as adapt the technology and go for the digitization process to survive in this. So wonderful discussion over here, Professor Manon and Mr. Roy. I would like to have
So let's move towards the voter question.
just a moment, Megha. Open this platform for question and answers, queries. If you have any kind of queries, you can just ask directly from the panelists, esteemed panelists over there.
Sir, can I just I am Harijan Das. I am from New Delhi. I am in a waste management sector. My question to Dr. Menon as well as to Mr. Roy. Sir, during this any disaster, like what has happened just 2 days back in our one of the regions in Himachal Pradesh. Now, waste management is one of the subject which is not being considered as particularly during the such disasters like toilets, temporary toilets for the people who are badly affected, which indirectly affects so badly. I mean, during the regeneration period or the resettlement period, what are the kind of such arrangement for both solid waste as well as the water waste, which comes out from this kind of affected people? What are being steps being taken by our disaster management institutes? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Actually,
Professor, you can answer.
yeah, thank you very much. This actually is a problem of solid waste management and liquid waste management is something which has been very challenging to even mega cities. We have seen that in Delhi, the landfill which has been there, uh, and even in Mumbai and Calcutta and Chennai, Bangalore, we are seeing that waste management, waste disposal is actually a big challenge even to municipal corporations and also to local bodies, even municipal councils. And so it is not only during disasters, even during normal times, waste management is a challenge. And I think that, the kind of solutions which many enterprises are coming up with for solid waste management, is actually something which we need to really study and replicate during normal times, and especially during disasters. We have seen that during floods, right now in Bihar and Assam, we are seeing the floods happening, and we know that actually the floods, when the floods affect several hundreds and thousands of villages and several millions of people are affected, we have this problem about relief camps where people whose houses have been submerged are actually evacuated. And we need to basically see that these people are actually able to have access to sanitation, safe drinking water, and many other solutions which are needed apart from relief supplies. So the waste management solutions in Kerala, when we had the floods in 2018 in August, there were more than 14.5 lakh people who were actually removed to the relief camps. A large number, very large number. And so the many organizations came forward to provide even incinerators to dispose of sanitary napkins for the adolescent girls and ladies. But the solution, whether the incinerators are actually eco-friendly solutions, are actually something which we need to really discuss. So even in Ghazipur in Delhi, we have seen that the kind of social waste, so solid waste management solutions which are being tried, there have been a lot of criticisms to those kind of solutions. So I think the during the floods, we have seen that the waste management is a big challenge, and so portable toilets are needed. That's a huge opportunity also for enterprises which can actually provide this in the flood-prone states in the country. And we also have this problem about water purification, because the many of the areas get actually inundated, and even the fecal matter gets into drinking water sources. Water bodies actually get affected very badly with the E. coli. So water purification becomes also a problem. So we may actually look at many such product ideas, from the MSME sector, and I'll be very happy to get to know more about what Mr. Das mentioned, from his company, what are the kind of solutions available, and we'll be happy to share this information with the various state disaster management authorities in flood-prone areas if solutions are available. And I think it'll be good also to know from WASME about these kind of product ideas which will be useful for disaster-prone states in the country.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Next question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm coming to, the decentralized waste management, like what you said, the portable toilets with water, with sanitation thing, as well as the decentralized water treatment, small plant. That should be a part to be carried along with our disaster management army, whoever go to the site, so that the people who are being put over there, they are giving the basic amenities, not to pollute the environment further, but to help them to see that their life is saved with the both, with their health as well as with their environment as well. So this is what exactly what we, and there are, sir, I am a retired person, but then I am have the knowledge from the other university on waste management. So that's much I was thankful to Mr. Roy, who was very well suggesting some point. Obviously, today data and that your IT-based solutions are required to give them a pre-information. But the people who are affected, they should be taken care with these basic amenities. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
One question from CA
Yes.
Hanmandika, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes. Yes.
Hello?
Very much.
Yes. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the issue is the government is initiating many welfare schemes for MSME for development its performance, but it is not reaching to the ground level as stated by the speaker. Why don't the government itself initiate the process directly, call for the suggestions and the help support needed by the MSME unit directly to the government itself, then they will forward it to the financial institution instead of delaying on financial institutions because they are delaying the implementation, delaying the financing also.
I think that timing is so critical. It's actually mission.
Sir, the ultimate goal is to improve the MSME. MSMEs are facing problems. Let the government itself will support them directly instead of going through banks. And banks are delaying implementing delaying tactics. They are not supporting on time to the MSMEs.
Right. Very true. We need to really look at the disbursal of loans and disbursal of funds and whatever stimulus packages which are actually being offered by the government is so mission critical. It's like oxygen. Funds are like oxygen. We need to see that the flow is uninterrupted, and especially because if you have operating costs, you need to have the smooth flow of funds so that the OPEX is not affected.
Yes.
And that is very much needed. And I think
Right.
that institutional platforms like WASME can actually do this kind of an advocacy to do that kind of course correction which is needed to make sure that we do not have to depend on financial institutions alone, and procedural delays and things like that should not actually cripple the MSME sector.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Noted. Any other question? Okay. Over to Megha.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of World Association for Small and Medium Enterprises, it's a great honor to propose the word of thanks to all guest speakers, participants, and WASME team.
Yes.
Somebody raised a question.
I would like
There's somebody raising a hand.
Oh, want to ask some question?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Somebody raised a hand.
My name is Dr. G.S. Darbari, and I'm from a micro industries, Darbari Industries, Allahabad. I just wanted to bring it to the information of Dr. Menon. Very, very profound suggestions and guidance that he gave. Sir, we made, especially during the case of disaster, whether it is earthquake or tsunami or something of that kind, the one or two things which immediately affect us is the communication link and the other is the power lines. As a consequence, the disaster team has to go with their own arrangement for communication and lights. Sir, we developed a very small, handy, it's like a book of an A4 size. You open it and these two becomes the solar panels, and you put it either on the any vehicle, on the top of the vehicle like this, or if you have a tent, you can put it on the tent. Now this kind of a solar light is able to give a sufficient light inside the tent or otherwise. You can do a perfect writing, reading, anything. And it also gives you an opportunity of charging your mobile, because that is again a question. So I just wanted to let you know that it is, when you mentioned about a lot of MSMEs are having ideas, so I just thought I must tell you on that, sir, this is what we had done it. We wrote to the Director General and National Disaster Management, but I'm sorry to say that there wasn't any feedback. I don't know whether it reached them or it did not, or whether they liked it or they did not. So can you throw some light as to who is the authority, the person or the designation whom I should get this kind of a thing informed about it?
Yeah, I think Mr. Darbari Sahab, actually, I think these kind of solutions are very much needed for all areas which are affected by cyclones and by floods and
Yes, yes,
landslides, and especially at night. In fact,
yes, sir.
I would like to hear more about this, and then we would basically suggest that you need to send this with the National Disaster Management Authority. I will just mention the email address and also the website. You can
Kindly.
actually see the website, and the contact addresses are there. I think it will be useful, and you could also contact uh, the National Disaster Response Force, the Director General of the National Disaster Response Force, because they are the first responders who are actually deployed to any disaster location, either before the disaster itself when there is an early warning, or at the time of a disaster. They are actually deployed. So the Director General of the National Disaster Response Force in Delhi would be the person who can actually evaluate this by agencies. And I think it will also be helpful if you can get this registered with the the recognized
Yes.
agencies for the government of India for the empanelment in the various ministries of the government of India. There is a platform which can actually register these kind of products and services. So once you have the certification and empanelment, the ministries and departments of the government of India and state governments will be able to procure that. I will write this in the chat group, in the chat box, so that you can contact these people. I have also
I'll
mentioned
be
my
obliged.
email address and mobile number. Thank you.
There was one point other than this product. I thought that, I'm sorry I joined a little late because I was occupied in some other activity. So there is a lot of talk about ease of doing business. We talk much of it, and we pat our back that we have achieved a great. I just would like to give you a little sample where the shoes are actually pinching. As of now, it seems that all the entrepreneurs have been made slaves in the hand of the government compliance agencies. Now the day begins, you see a message from XYZ agency, this information to be given on this date before this time. You have to upload the data. Now what is this upload business? The people in the government department or government offices who were collecting the data and filling it into the records, we do the job. We have to fill in their records. It is our job to format the data, put it and load it on the site. So far, so good. It's good that we have talking about digital and so on. Now, let's give you one example. You see, if you are a registered company under the MCA laws, you have to, it has happened recently. Under the MCA rules, the company has to file a return called DPT3, which says wherever you have taken any loan from or any advance from, you have to declare. Fair enough. Absolutely right. You should ask this. And should you fail to comply with this request before 30th of June, the minimum fine is 1 crore rupees. And it could be double the amount of the loan which you have taken, with the further possibility of imprisonment. Now just see where you stand on this. See, many micro or small industries would not even have their authorized capital, leave aside the subscribe. They wouldn't even have the authorized capital to the extent of 1 crore. And you are putting a fine of 1 crore. What a big deal. It is only an information that you want. And then this information, even if it is delayed, yes, you give a quarter time, April, May, and June. April and May, no, we all know about what had been there during the April and May. No letup was given in the case of this. And if you do not do it on 30th of June, as a result, where a micro or a small unit, which is a single person or two persons unit, has to stop everything else and start doing onto this thing, website not working, you have to wait, and then this thing is not working, the data is not exchanging, you have to wait, and you keep on waiting till 9 o'clock in the night, and you do it because there's a fine of 1 crore which you cannot afford to pay. Otherwise, your entire unit will get attached. Is this the ease of business that we're talking about? Is this the ease of business that we are patting our back on? Look at the Employees Provident Fund. Employees Provident Fund says if an employee retires, the employer's contribution, a part of it is a pension and rest is a provident fund. Employee is supposed to get this pension immediately after his retirement on application online. Fair enough. That's a good provision. But what is happening in practice? In the year 2012, 13, 14, this employee in the month of such and such, had drawn his salary, which was below his normal salary, and obviously the contribution thereto. So employee is denied the pension on the pretext that you go to the employer and ask your employer to certify that during the month of the year 2012, 13 or 11 or 9, 2009, your salary was actually paid was this much. Now, is this not an additional, and I'm using the word loudly, without hesitation, is a stupid provision.
Sorry
that
to
you are asking the employer to
interrupt,
tax
Dr.
himself.
Talwari. Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Talwari. You can just share your question in short so that the panelists can just answer the
Now,
because you are just
instead of
narrating the whole story, because we have already forwarded this concern to the government of India so many times. Government is working on that. We have got interacted with the ministries and others. Okay, so this will take another challenge. So you can write all the concern points on the mail, and accordingly we can forward it to the government of India, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, over to Megha.
Any other questions from anyone, or let's move towards the vote of thanks session, sir?
Yes, you can. No question.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of World Association for Small and Medium Enterprises, it's a great honor to propose the vote of thanks to all guest speakers participating.
Megha, your voice is breaking. Okay.
Can't hear you, Megha.
Yes. Your voice is not clear,
No
Megha.
voice.
Okay. On behalf of WASME, I would like to extend my vote of thanks to the speakers over there finally, Professor Manon and Mr. Roy, for joining this discussion. This was a wonderful discussion. We have already learned a lot, and the MSMEs, those who are already hardest in this pandemic, they will get benefited with your valuable talk, sir. So we will see you in the future. We would like to just thank all the participants who have taken up their valuable time to attend this particular webinar. This is a very relevant topic over there, and I would like to extend our thank to the WASME team for organizing such kind of webinar. So I would have to have your participation in the future also. Thank you very much.
Bye.
So in the chat box, you have